Once again, welcome to the Watchdog Report. Ed Safone here, your host. Today is 9/11, September 11. And Act for America was out there at 5:30 on the intersections of 202 and 35 to bring up the remembrance of what happened on 9/11. And also the town had some ceremony in remembrance. But my special guest today and co-host is going to tell you his story the day he woke up, went to work at the New York Stock Exchange on September 11th, 2001. Now, I asked him if it would be all right if we talked about it, and he said he would talk about it. So let me introduce Gregory Kane, who's running for County Legislator of the 4th District in Westchester County. So Greg, thanks again for coming. I know it's a topic that's probably difficult for you to talk about, but we had this conversation once before and I was really affected by it. So just tell the viewers, if you can, how that day started and how it ended.
Well, it's one of those days that is scarred in my memory, and I really don't talk about it a lot. And the most painful things about it is how it affected my family and how they supported me. That still hurts, and when I start thinking about them, then it gets emotional. I remember that day quite well, obviously, but the day started out just like any other day, except that day I had a late start, and I took the train out of Katona. I remember walking to the train, and I was thinking, what a beautiful day it was. And it was very quiet, and I thought that was kind of odd. So I got on the train, and I fell asleep. And usually I read my papers on the train. It was one of those days that I just didn't have the gumption to read the paper. And so I wasn't paying attention to the time and stuff, and the train was late, and I got to Grand Central. I got on the subway, and when I got out of the subway, it was right after I got out of the subway, the first plane just hit the World Trade Center. And I remember thinking when I was walking up the stairs, I said, oh my God, I'm really late for work. I forgot there was a ticker tape parade, because there's all this stuff, streams of paper and dust was already flying down. And then people started saying, oh, a plane hit the World Trade Center. So I walked up to see the World Trade Center, and which is like 3 blocks away from the Stock Exchange, 3-4 blocks. And I was thinking to myself, well, I'm sure the building was designed for a plane to hit the World Trade Center, just like the Empire State Building was hit one time by a plane. So I remember walking up, and there was still, at that point, it was like a ticker tape parade. So I got up to the World Trade Center, and you then started seeing things coming out of the building, people. I remember seeing a desk fly out, and you saw this man fly out, and everybody was screaming, and then you saw him go down, and I didn't think the man jumped out. I worked down there for 30 years, and when you were down there, the wind was always very strong. So, in fact, I used to work at the Merrill Lynch building for Merrill Lynch when I started on Wall Street, and every year, the Woolworth building or another building around there, the wind was so strong, it would suck windows out of the other buildings. And once I saw these, there was just more than one person, there was some other people, I said, no, look, there's no reason to sit here and look at this. This is like looking at a terrible car accident or something. I said, I'm sure that everything's going to be all right. The building's designed for an event like this. So I walked down and got my coffee, went into the exchange, and when I got to the exchange, you have a routine. You change your suit jacket to a floor jacket, and then you change your shoes because you stood all day. I had my coffee and a little breakfast, and everybody was watching the TV station, the TVs, because it was down on the trading floor. There was hundreds of TVs around there, and we're all watching it. And then all of a sudden, you see the second plane go into the other building. And the moment you saw the other plane on the TV, everybody, especially I thought that, I said, my God, someone captured this on film, this plane going into the World Trade Center. But then everybody realized that it was a second plane.
Wow.
And then you heard this big explosion. And I go, oh my God. And then suddenly, it was a moment of, it probably wasn't that much, it was a quiet, and then everybody started getting out of there. And somebody says, a terrorist attack. And people started leaving right away. And then, for one reason or another, once the topic of terrorism came up, they locked down the building. They didn't want anybody to leave because they didn't know what was outside. We were always, when we worked at the stock exchange, you were always under the impression that it was a terrorist site for either domestic or international terrorists. So we now were locked into the building. You couldn't leave, but you could go out the front door a little bit every now and then for some air just to try to calm yourself, but you couldn't leave the close proximity of the exchange. So when I was there, you know, I would walk from rooms to rooms because we didn't know what was going on. So everybody was pretty scared. And so time went by, and I would go, back then we didn't have cell phones, and phones were not allowed on the trading floor. You couldn't like go to you would have to leave the trading floor to make a phone call. It was of the rules and stuff like that. So so I would go to different places and call home and tell my wife I was okay every now and then. So then Dick Grasso, who then was the chairman of the stock exchange, gets on the loudspeaker and says, we're going to evacuate the building, and everybody start getting your belongings. And all of a sudden we heard this big explosion, big sound. And Dick Grasso said, what the F was that? And then all of a sudden we looked at the monitors, and then you saw the first building going down. And then the horror of everybody screaming at that moment was frightening. And then when the buildings came down, there was this dust cloud, and it looked like something you would see in a movie. Now the dust came down and just filled in. It was I don't know how. It was just this huge dust cloud just coming into the buildings. Every nick and cranny that was open, fresh air would come in, and people, you know, were standing by the 11 wall, which was the entrance to Wall Street, and you saw the people being covered, and at that point I ran back into the trading floor, and you kind of ran to the other end because there was this dust cloud following you, and people were just covered. And I had a friend of mine, I used to be Mike was his name. He was outside, and he ran to the Staten Island, towards the Staten Island ferry. He was running with a coworker of mine, and he